Hello and welcome to Political Geekery, a podcast about science, politics and the intersection of the two. I'm Sean.
I'm Mark.
And I'm Elliot.
Hi Elliot. This is this is a slightly late episode by 2 months now. Just for the lack of a word in the English language to describe the amount of equipment related bullshit we've been through, I'm going to call minor technical difficulties. But anyway, we've got a slightly new format we're just experimenting with, so Elliot's going to be joining us today to discuss homelessness and his involvement in activism around that.
And finally we're on episode 10.
Hey. So, Health Secretary and sentient rhyming slang Jeremy Hunt has been having a little bit of conflict with his staff lately. I don't know if anybody's seen this. I think it's made the news once or twice. So he's wanting to push a number of changes in the NHS. Some of the more controversial things in this are relating to pay and to staffing. So he essentially wants to cut antisocial hours pay for doctors. He wants to relax the rules on how many hours they can be expected to work. And he's tried to justify this by saying, well, you know, I want a 24/7 NHS, as if like A&E departments were closing overnight.
Oh yeah, don't get sick over the weekends. You can't get in.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
said no one.
Yeah. Well, if you ever go past the Royal in town of a Saturday night, you'll notice it's just completely deserted.
Oh yeah. Well.
Graveyard.
Mm.
So one of the ways the hunters try to justify this is by talking about this idea of the weekend effect. So this is an effect where hospitals have an increased mortality rate at the weekends. And I mean, this is a documented phenomenon, and it's been partially attributed to lower staffing levels during antisocial hours, amongst other things. So one of the things that Hunt said a little while ago now, it was recent when I wrote this, was that Hunt made this specific claim that if you have a stroke at the weekend, you are 20% more likely to die than if it had been during the week. Mm. Now, this claim appears to have come from a June 2015 study published in PLOS One by Roberts et al. Called Mortality Following Stroke, the Weekend Effect and Related Factors Record Linkage Study. So this study looked at nearly 38,000 hospital admissions for stroke from 2004 to 2012, and it did indeed find a 19% increased risk of mortality within 1 week from stroke for weekend admissions, where weekend was defined as Saturday, Sunday and public holidays. So on average of a weekend, 88 per 100,000 people will be admitted to hospital for a stroke, of whom 12.9%, about 11 per 100,000 in the population as a whole, will die. Of a weekday, 111 per 100,000 people will be admitted to hospital for a stroke, of whom 11.1%, about 12 per 100,000 will die. So that's your 19% increase in risk. About 2% in absolute terms.
Sorry to interrupt, but I've heard that a doctor come out and say that you're more likely to die on a Wednesday than any other point in the week, and they actually have higher staffing levels on the Wednesday as opposed to the weekend. I wondered if you come across that at all.
I mean, that's not something I've looked into.
It's not something I've looked into, but this doctor was making the case that Wednesday is the. I think he was speaking more generally though, not for any specific illness.
Yeah.
And he's saying that the staffing levels are actually higher around, and as though they've already sussed this out. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that's kind of alarming in itself with how hunters use this statistic, is that, I mean, what he's essentially done there, or rather probably what one of his junior researchers has done here, is they've gone through the literature and found some statistics that back up their case, without necessarily sort of looking at the broad sweep of the literature. I mean, there's the old adage about how politicians use statistics like a drunk uses a lamppost for support rather than illumination.
I do like that.
But this is the thing though, the difference between what Hunter said and what the paper found is that Hunter said if you have a stroke at the weekend you are 20% more likely to die. What the study found was if you are admitted to hospital for a stroke at the weekend you're 20% more likely to die. It's
Oh.
a fairly important distinction, I think.
So I take it there are more admissions over the weekend.
Well, I mean, this is something I'm going to get to. But yeah, so the study, they looked at a number of possible confounding factors, so including size of the admitting hospital, time of year that the patient was admitted, distance of the patient from the admitting hospital, social deprivation of the area the patient lived in, stroke subtype, and they adjusted mortality rate for patient comorbidities. So that means that, say, if a patient had cardiovascular disease as well as having suffered a stroke, they would sort of adjust the mortality rates to reflect the fact that somebody who has a pre-existing condition is already more likely to die from that
Complications.
Yeah, on top of the like complications from a stroke.
Yeah.
And the data was analysed using multivariate logistic regression, which is a fairly standard statistical model for analysing things like risk when you have categorical data. And significance was looked at both the standard p less than 0.05 level and using the Bonferroni correction for multiple comparisons, which might not mean much to a lot of people, but it is good practice. Statistically speaking, this study seems to have been pretty rigorous. But it's also true that admissions for strokes were lower at weekends by 21%. So, I mean, as I said earlier, about 88 per 100,000 people in the population will be admitted to hospital for a stroke of a weekend. 111 per 100,000 people will be admitted for a stroke during the week, according to this study. So, I mean, that's an interesting thing. Now, Dave Curtis, who's a professor at University College London's Genetics Institute, pointed out that this suggests one of two things. So either you're more likely to have a stroke during the week than at the weekend, which isn't very likely for how strokes actually work. I mean, basically it's not something that you would expect to sort of vary that much in frequency throughout the week as a rule. Or the other possibility is that you are less likely to be admitted to hospital if you have a stroke at the weekend than you are during the week. Now, the latter case might occur, say, if somebody has what I'll call a less serious stroke. Obviously, there's no such thing as a not serious stroke, but
one caught early enough.
Yeah, or well, something that maybe seems somewhat more minor, then they might be more likely to be dealt with at a clinic, or it might be less likely to be caught right away. It might be less likely that they'll bother to go to the hospital, because they may well think, oh god, well, it's really busy in hospital of a weekend, and I've heard that I'm more likely to die if I go now. So which is a real concern. A lot of doctors have come forward with about Hunt's doing down of their work, really.
I mean, it makes me wonder about the nocebo effect as well. I wonder if that has a negative effect on people's health. I'm sure it's kind of negligible, but it does kind of make me think.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much of an effect it'd have on things like mortality rates.
But true.
I mean,
strokes
probably doesn't help.
Placebo and nocebo effects, generally speaking, tend to. I mean, this isn't something I've looked into a lot, so I could be wrong. And hopefully, if somebody's listening to this who knows better, they'll tell me I'm talking shit. But from what I understand, placebo and nocebo effects tend to affect either subjective outcomes, so things like how much pain are you in, how well do you feel in yourself, things like that, which are important.
That's what I've heard, yeah.
Or they've also been observed to affect things that aren't necessarily subjective but are continuous. So measurements, things like that, how big is this thing, that sort of thing. They seem to be less likely to affect things that are binary and objective. So, is the patient dead or not, for instance. So at the risk of sounding a bit glib, but, I don't know. I mean, it's possible.
There's that one with the saline solution with asthmatics, which I thought was quite interesting, and one group was told that it wouldn't cause anything, and one group was, and the group that was obviously suffered a lot more asthma attacks. Yeah. Which is an interesting one. But anything added into the negative effect while you're in hospital is not a good thing.
Yeah, it can't be great. And even if it is, only affecting how much pain people experience or how happy they are, that's not really an only.
Yeah.
I mean, that sort of thing does matter, and it can have an impact on how well people recover from things, because there's a big psychological component in recovery from sort of serious injury and illness, obviously. So the thing about there being more admissions during the week, now it's worth noting that the study did find that some subtypes of stroke are more common in hospital admissions at weekends than on weekdays, and this was significant at p less than 0.001. So there's a very strong association there. The profile of patients coming in at the weekend is not the same as the profile of patients coming in during the week.
Could you make that into like an easier percentage for someone like me to understand?
Basically what they found was that so when you're looking at something like this, you'll look at how common things are during the week, and you'll look at how common they are at the weekend. I don't have the exact stats.
Yeah, sorry, put you on the spot a bit, but
no. But basically, so you'll look at it and you'll sort of say, okay, well, so you'll look at counts usually. So you'll have like what we call a contingency table. You'll have like a column which is during the week and a column which is weekdays, and then your rows will be types of stroke. You'll have counts for each one, and what you'll be looking at is the count of, say, stroke type A more common than we would expect it to be if there was no difference. If the difference between weekend and weekday was by chance, and that's what you're looking at there. So I mean, like, so the p-value you've got there. What you're saying with a p-value essentially is what are the chances I would get this result if the null hypothesis is true, if there's no real difference between the two things I'm comparing.
Okay.
I mean that's a whole distinction that we can get into. It's not the probability that it happened by chance. It's the probability that something would have happened by chance.
Right.
This entire thing can be sort of looked at as an example of something in statistics called conditional independence. So most of our listeners are probably familiar with the idea of correlation and causation not being the same thing. So, I mean, we've all seen there's the graph of global warming versus the decline of piracy. There's
the organic foods and the autistic birth rate is a great one, I think.
Yeah. Basically, you can pick anything that is increasing and say it's causing this thing that we also know is increasing, because it turns out that if two things are increasing at the same time and you put them on a graph together, then they both increase. That sort of thing, pirates and global warming, organic food and autism diagnosis rates, that's basically a purely spurious correlation. You've got two things which are basically completely independent of each other. There's no real sort of relationship between the two, or if there is, it's mediated by so many other factors that you might as well say that they're completely independent. There's no reason to think that less pirates causes more global warming. I don't know. I mean, maybe there is. I don't know. I'm not a climatology or piracy expert, but let's say for the sake of argument that those two things are independent. If they're independent, any correlation between the two is just a result of chance. It's not that one causes the other. They're unrelated, and they just happen to either both be increasing at the same time, or one was increasing while the other was decreasing.
Could be just too hot for piracy these days.
So, slightly more slippery than this sort of thing of spurious correlation is conditional independence. So, one of the sort of canonical examples you see an awful lot is this idea that, let's say, for the sake of argument, you find that there's a correlation between ice cream sales and drowning. So, you look at, for a particular town, and you see that you graph sales of ice cream against number of people who drown on a given day, and you find that they correlate very closely. There's a strong positive correlation between the two, and then you sort of say, oh well, that's got to be spurious. Then you look at a few more towns and you find, oh, this seems to be consistent in other seaside towns, and this seems to be happening with quite big data sets and over a long period of time. So on the one hand, if you were to confuse correlation and causation, you could say that ice cream causes drowning. So I don't know, eating ice cream somehow just makes you a worse swimmer, or something like that. Or you could even go the opposite way around. You could say, well, maybe people are witnessing their family members drown, and then the only way that they can cheer themselves up
is with ice cream.
I don't know. I mean, ice cream's good. I don't think that would quite work for me, to be honest. So I mean, we could say those are two. Let's say those are two hypotheses with a fairly low prior probability. So what do you two reckon could explain something like that?
Well, obviously more people going there at a particular time and doing both eating ice cream and swimming.
Yeah, basically more people on the beach to both drown and eat ice cream.
Exactly, and this is what we mean by conditional independence. So if we were to say, look at the number of people on the beach on those days, we'd very likely find that correlation between ice cream sales and drowning disappears altogether. That basically ice cream sales and your risk of drowning are conditionally independent. As long as you know the value of some other variable, in this case, number of people on the beach, say.
Or how sunny it is.
Yeah, which, I mean, itself would be a good example of, so, you know, how sunny it is would be sort of correlated with how many people are on the beach.
Yeah.
Which it would then be correlated both with ice cream sales and with drowning. So, I mean, so there's a relationship between the two things, but it's not necessarily that one directly causes the other. And this, I mean, it's not necessarily what's going on with this stroke study, but it's a possible explanation for why you might be seeing a higher mortality rate at the weekend for some conditions in hospitals, because people who go to hospital at the weekend tend to be much more seriously ill as a rule. I mean, I think we've all done it where we've had something that we really should get checked out, but we've sort of gone, do you know what, I'm not going to the walk-in centre on a Saturday afternoon or whatever. I'll see what it's like on Monday and I'll go to the GP. We've all done it.
Yeah. I was also just thinking that there's probably more people being admitted, through people drinking and getting into fights over the weekend. I'm just wondering how much that affects the NHS.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably a factor as well. I think people just tend to be more active of a weekend as well.
That's true. Yeah,
that's probably a factor. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so there's. I mean, there's also. I think it's probably reasonable to say that staffing levels is probably a factor. I mean, it would probably be reasonable to say that. If you've got less staff on at the hospital, maybe people aren't getting seen to as quickly. Maybe they're not getting seen by the right kind of doctor in as timely a fashion. I mean, maybe there isn't the right kind of consultant on staff that day. These things do happen. But I mean, I suppose what I would say to Mr. J. Berkshire Hunt about that would be pay for more fucking staff at the weekend. Like, cutting people's pay and increasing the number of hours that you expect them to work. That's not a solution to that problem.
I think part of me does think this is deliberate in order to try and get them to go private. Get them to go into private jobs.
Absolutely.
I thought that from the second I heard it, without knowing one half of what you just said.
Now, the thing is, though, I mean, like this stroke study, they do acknowledge a lot of this in the discussion part of the paper. Funnily enough, Hunt didn't mention, saying mortality was increased for admissions at the weekend, although a lower admission rate on weekends suggests that the weekend effect may well be influenced by variation in stroke severity, and they call for further study to look into this, to check that out, check whether stroke severity is a factor there. So the authors of the study, I don't think, have done anything wrong here. I mean, what you've got is a politician cherry-picking scary sounding statistics in order to look good on the telly.
That's what they do best. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Trident replacement. Now, for something like this, I'm sure I'll be called some sort of, threat to national security because I want rid of Trident, but here goes. So, I haven't always had the same opinion on this sort of thing. My original opinion on it when I was a teenager was that if everyone simply just had an atomic bomb each, the world would be far too afraid to go to war with itself. And it was only after watching some of Carl Sagan's stuff that I started to change my tune on it, and I would recommend listening, watching, or reading any of Carl Sagan's work. But he made the point that on a long enough time scale, they would inevitably be used by someone crazy enough to use them.
There's like a really amazing metaphor that Sagan used in Cosmos, where he was talking about the nuclear arms race, and so this thing during the Cold War of America saying, we've got 11 billion nukes, and then Russia's like, we've got 11 billion and one. And Carl Sagan, I think, it was just a brilliant sort of, it just sort of encapsulated how absurd the whole situation was. He sort of said, well, it's a bit like two sworn enemies stood waist deep in petrol, arguing about who has the most matches.
Yeah. And when you consider, like, the most powerful atomic bomb that's been made public is the Tsar Bomba, which is a 50 megaton bomb. Put that into a little bit of perspective, the ones that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima are only 3 megaton each, which is, obviously still a devastating weapon, but you compare that to a 50 megaton blast, it's unbelievable. So, quick question, how many atomic bombs do you think are in total worldwide, and this is an estimate, bear in mind, it's not clear, but where do you think it would be at this time?
Can you give me a starting figure?
No.
The thing is,
I don't do that, I'm mean.
It's probably in the hundreds of thousands.
I mean, and see, the thing is, I know that you told us this the first time we attempted to record this, so, but I can't remember for the life of me.
Alright,
I'm going to say in the tens of thousands.
want to give it a go, or
I'll say 100,000, and hopefully I'm way off.
16,300.
Oh,
How many do you think the UK has?
16.
60.
16.
16.
12.
64. And that's those 64 nukes are separated between 4 Vanguard submarines. Now, they are carrying about 16 each, and we tend to have one out at sea and one in bay and one doing something else
That'll be where
elsewhere.
I got that number from. Then.
So, at any given point, there's 16 nukes floating around the planet ready to fire and cause a war crime.
Yeah, that's definitely too many nukes by about 16.
Well, as I say, we've got 64 of the things,
Yeah.
and you can fire a good half of the planet could be fired at any given point. If you look on the wiki pages, it actually shows you a chart of where it could potentially fire, and it's vast. Costs something like 3 billion a year just to maintain the weapons that hopefully will never be used. Because, as I said earlier, it's a war crime waiting to happen, in my opinion. How much do you think it would cost to replace? Now, estimates vary wildly on this one. So you've got more than a good chance of getting this one right, I think. The lowest estimate is 15 billion. Any ideas where it might go up to? That's a government estimate, by the way.
50 billion?
We're warm. And it goes from 15 to 20. Some suggesting that it'd be like 34, and the highest is 100 billion. Yeah.
To be fair, though,
Not sure who to believe on that one.
I mean, to be fair, though, government contracts never overspend or overrun.
Oh, no, they're
never.
really, really good at not overspending.
Yeah. Well, they're particularly good at choosing the contractor who will give sort of the best deal at the lowest price, and do it efficiently, with sort of no sort of favouring of companies that the people making the decision might want to work for later. Yeah, it's the great thing about sort of public-private partnerships is that they always work so well for everybody.
Yeah. So we're one of 9 countries with weapons of mass destruction, as they call them for other countries. Naturally, they call them a deterrent in this country. And I hate the sort of weasel type of words they use. Personally, I think they should be called, weapons that indiscriminately kill cats, dogs, people, and do it for generations.
Try giving that an acronym, though.
You can, I'm not.
WTIKPCD, all kinds of other things.
More vowels in there to be.
It's also like the fact that we're considering replacing it. I mean, the Cold War's been over since, was it 91 officially?
Was it 91 or 89?
I don't know, when did the Berlin Wall go?
89.
That was kind of the beginning of the end, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know.
But you got countries like America and Russia which have been cutting back on them. I think today's threat isn't from scary Russia threatening to nuke parts of the world, or scary whoever wants to nuke parts of the world. I think today's threat to security is coming more from suicide bombers and things of that nature.
Small terrorist groups.
Yeah, which you're not going to stop with the Trident program.
Yeah, well, it's this thing though, and it's the thing with this whole thing of bombing Syria as well. Just bombs in general, really. Basically the reason that they carry on doing it is because they don't fucking care how many civilians they kill. It's this idea we'll just bomb the shit out of wherever we think these groups are, and we'll kill enough of them to fix the problem forever. That's how you fix problems. Just by killing
just
them.
keep killing people.
Kill the right number of people and you can fix anything. I think at around the 7 billion mark, all of our problems go away forever.
Yeah.
They used to say it about the British Army in Ireland as well, that the British Army was the best recruiting agent the IRA ever had. And you see the same thing, I think, in Iraq and in Syria, that these groups thrive on the fact that that Western forces are just dropping bombs on fucking everyone. You can sort of see how that's then going to drive people towards all kinds of things, really. which isn't to sort of say that it's morally justified, obviously, because I'm sure somebody will try to twist my fucking words. But yeah,
it bugs me, like, people, like, I've talked to people about this, like, subject, and they're just like, oh, but what would you use as a deterrent? And it's just like, it's not as though we, like, if we were to be attacked by an atomic bomb, we wouldn't be able to strike back with just ordinary conventional bombs. You know, it's not as though we couldn't retaliate without an atomic bomb. We seriously could. We're pretty good at dropping bombs, as it turns out. You know, there's this country that's pretty much constantly at war at the minute.
I was under the impression that a big part of the reason why the British state really wants to keep Trident is that being as a permanent member of the Security Council is linked to being a part of the the nuclear club.
Also, we're a part of the Big Five, as they call it.
Yeah.
Which are the original members, aren't they? And because they have nuclear weapons.
So it's a dick measuring competition, really.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I do kind of love the way that
politicians want to sit at the big table with the rich people.
Yeah, it kind of exposes, I think, fundamentally how full of shit this idea that you know, sort of international politics has anything to do with, like, diplomacy or, you know, or peace or discussion, because, you know, the people who are given the most power are the ones with the scariest fucking weapons.
Yeah.
Institutionally, it's built into the structure of these organisations.
Well, they put
And
themselves in charge, really,
it enables-
because of their big
Exactly,
weapons.
that's what I mean.
It enables, like, the countries
Power.
with atomic bombs to go to war with countries without. It essentially gives the bully of the playground a big shiny stick, and then people say, oh, well, it helps keep peace. No, it doesn't. If anything, it just makes us the bigger bully with the shiny stick. It's always annoyed me, that sort of, oh, it helped keep peace.
Well, you know, I mean, again, it comes down to power, I think, because, I mean, you sort of strip out a lot of the bullshit from that, and what it basically comes down to is, you know, if everybody's too scared of our military to sort of argue with us, then they'll just do what they're told instead of trying to resist whatever the fuck we want. It's about power, fundamentally, I think.
Yeah, and trying to convince politicians to give up their power is an uphill struggle, don't get me wrong. But I think we've just reached a point. I mean, we've had atomic bombs since, well, Britain's had the nuclear capability since 1969, originally with the Polaris class submarine. I think, you know, 2016, you know, they're set to be renewed by 2020, but I think that should be about it for us. I think we should retire them. What's the point? Yeah, so if anyone's kind of on the fence on this, I'd recommend listening to any of Carl Sagan's arguments on this topic. If that doesn't sway you, I don't think anything will.
I've been working with a few different homeless charities for the past few months, working through Liverpool, going out feeding the homeless, talking to homeless people, and learning a lot about the situation and how terrible it is, and how we got here, where homelessness is becoming an epidemic. And there's no one reason, but the government will tell you there's only 498 homeless people on the streets at any one night.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's utter bullshit.
Yeah.
But then, what do you expect from a party that has Jeremy Hunt in it?
Yeah, well, if you've ever been to a city centre in Britain, you know that's bollocks.
Yeah. Absolute bullshit.
It's because of the way they measure it. Basically, to be classed as homeless, you firstly have to apply to be homeless, if that makes any sense to you.
No, that's the most utterly ridiculous thing going.
No.
You also have to be rough sleeping. Lying down, if you're sitting up, you're not.
You're not homeless if you're sitting up.
Yep. You're not
For fuck's
you're
sake.
not rough sleeping if you're sitting up.
This is giving my arse a headache.
And that's not even all of it. There's tons of little loopholes they go to. Oh, you're not homeless. You're not homeless. You know, if
So
you're
any excuse they can literally dream up.
yeah,
they
if
can
you're
worm out
sleeping on a
saying.
friend's couch, you're not homeless. If you're in a hostel, you're not homeless. There's lots of reasons they use to get the figure down.
Yeah, of course.
So there's not
'Cause
one
then people
figure
might-
for
sorry.
how many people are
Well,
homeless.
you get this. It's just such a disgusting idea. This idea of intentionally homeless.
Yeah.
I mean that one particularly gets me because I mean, if you fall behind on your rent,
Yeah,
and
if you
get
can't
evicted,
pay your rent, you're intentionally homeless.
Yeah.
which is just What?
Because people don't pay their rent on purpose.
One of the things that
I'm sure that's happened in the past, but the vast majority of people pay their rent to keep their house.
I mean, I've been out a couple of times with you guys, and just like literally hanging about the streets for a few hours and feeling really cold. I wanted to get home after that, and that was just me standing there with a suitcase, not particularly, stressed by anything. No one wants to be homeless, I don't think.
No. Well, you say that, but people do become institutionalised
Yeah, that's
to
true.
it very quickly.
Right, no one starts off
far
that
more
way.
quickly than people become institutionalised to the army or prisons, because it's such a hard lifestyle. It's so much harder than, I think, what most people have ever gone through in their life.
Yeah. Well, it's the amount of shit that people give them. I think, they have to put up with an awful lot as well as being homeless.
Yeah, they're not uncommon to have their stuff stolen, strangely. It's not uncommon to be assaulted.
Yeah. I think that's depressing.
The police as well. Just
Oh, the bastards.
that's a fucking. It's kind of axiomatic, that all cops are bastards. But but the attitude that they have when dealing with sort of like with homeless people, that just what I've seen myself, like you're about in town and things like that. I mean, like I saw like a homeless fellow who was getting arrested outside the Tesco, and like I was on my way out, like, and I walked past this and I sort of stopped and sort of said, well, the first thing I said to this busy was, are you making him move? I mean, I see the guy sat by there all the time. Like, I don't think he really has anywhere else to go, to be honest. And he goes, no, I'm arresting him.
What was his reason for arresting him?
Well, he said, he's on bail and he's not supposed to be on this particular road. And I said, well, where the fuck do you expect him to go, dickhead? Which, at that point I realised I probably needed to moderate my language somewhat before I ended up in the back of the van. In the end I just sort of I hung around. I mean, there was nothing I could do to stop the guy from getting arrested. I hung around at least to make sure that the cop behaved himself while he was arresting him.
Point the camera at him while he's...
I was going to say there's tons of videos on YouTube where police have tried to move people, and the decent members of the public are just like, why are you asking him to move? He's quite welcome to stay here, and we give him stuff and whatever. Why are you doing this? And they're just like, oh, give one crappy reason or another. It's just like, just fuck off. You're not needed. Not in that situation.
No.
The point of the police is to serve and protect.
No,
that doesn't matter whether you're wealthy or not, or homeless or not. I don't think.
No, I mean,
it shouldn't.
I'd say I've spent a lot of time around the homeless of Liverpool, and to be honest, I feel much safer around them than I do about random drunk people or the police or just other members of the public, really.
Yeah. To be honest, if I see a group of lads who are obviously pissed, I'll cross the road to avoid them. I wouldn't bother if somebody was just asking for some change. I know they're not going to decide that they have some reason to kick the shit out of me, for instance.
No. And surprising the generosity of homeless people as well. They're just like willing to share with each other and things. That surprises me most.
They look out for each other.
Yeah.
Because they don't really have anyone else.
I suppose if you're in that situation, it's just kind of... I mean, you do essentially end up part of a community, don't you?
Accidentally, yeah. It's strange the difference how many women there are out. I think it's probably about 10% or so of the homeless in Liverpool, at least, are women.
To be honest, I'm surprised that it isn't higher. But
Yeah.
Well, the reasons for women, or men and women, being homeless are different. See, with women being homeless, it's generally because they've escaped domestic violence and they have nowhere else to go. They don't have friends or family.
Do you think? Sorry to interrupt. Do you think people take them in because they see them as being more vulnerable than men, perhaps?
That's probably a factor. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've often thought that.
There's so much funding has been lost for sort of organisations helping people sort of trying to escape from abusive sort of home situations.
But Sean, the government says there are no homeless people, so it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's...
No, there's 500.
Oh, well, yeah.
Put them in a warehouse.
There's only some homeless people. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's like so recently. One of the things I saw was that basically the UK's only, as far as I know, only charity dealing with LGBT survivors of intimate partner violence has basically been forced to close because they can't afford to stay open anymore, and that's a huge problem.
Were they a charity or a government organisation?
They were a charity, Broken Rainbow.
I have heard of them.
Yeah, but they basically they've been massively hit by funding cuts.
Charities, they suffer a lot of red tape. They
Mm.
have to tick more boxes than most companies do,
Mhm.
and we're constantly being told stories about them being terrible simply because of their hands are tied behind their back a lot of the time, because they want to help people, they just can't because they don't fit the right criteria.
Mm.
Can't tick enough boxes, so you don't get helped.
I mean, because you mentioned about going out and feeding people and things like that. So
Yeah,
mean-
that's things charities can't do.
mm.
They don't have the funding for it. They don't.
Probably insurance issues as well.
Insurance issues. They would basically need a security team with them if they did that.
Mm.
Not necessary, but
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
that's the kind of thing they would have to deal
Well, the
with.
company does have to cover its own arse, doesn't it?
It does.
That type of stuff.
yeah. Well, I mean, in some areas it is actually illegal as well, disgustingly, to like give out food on
It
the
is.
street.
That makes them beggars, and then they're criminals for
Mm.
receiving things off you. And
Wow.
Yeah, like there's like local bylaws which you can be prosecuted under for giving food to homeless people, and I mean there was locally.
What
There was like
twat came up with that law?
we've never had a problem with it ourselves, but I've heard of it with other people.
Jesus Christ.
All of the teams, I think there's a team that runs every night now in
Mm,
Liverpool. In fact, some double up and 2 teams a night,
mm,
and they're all voluntary.
mm.
There's no charities that go around and do that.
So like there was a group of people recently, I'm sure you will have seen, had to go to court and defend themselves because they were arrested while running a soup kitchen.
I know
because
the
it
ones you
was
mean.
yeah, because it was too near a squat that was embarrassing the council.
How do these fucks sleep at night? That's what I want to know.
On top
What
of
kind of
On
medication
top of
are they
money.
on?
On top of mattresses filled with money.
I mean, I think it's a great thing that you guys are out there doing that. Like, it's I mean, it's not just food either, is it?
No, clothes and sleeping bags and whatever we can get hands on that is
Yes.
useful, basically.
Sometimes tents and things.
Sometimes
isn't it?
tents, yeah. Yeah, if you live in Merseyside and you want to donate to the groups, you can find most of them on Facebook. The one I work with is Helping Every Living Person Liverpool. One Community Project Northwest is another group. They run soup kitchens and a few other projects. The Love Kitchen runs over Saturday, I think. You can find them on Facebook as well. And Lending a Helping Hand Liverpool is another good group. They do the same thing as we do. Go around and give out food and clothes and things.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks very much for joining us.
I'd just like to give a little shout out for Natalie Jennifer Parr for helping us update our logo. Nice one.
Okay. Well, yeah. I think that's all we've got time for. Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
It's alright.
Goodbye.
Political Geekery is an independent production. For more information about the show, visit our website politicalgeekery.wordpress.com. You can contact us via email on politicalgeekery@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter @polgeekery or find us on Facebook. If you've enjoyed the show, please share it.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to write something positive next time.
Fluffy kittens have increased in popularity.
Well, yeah, the internet exists. I'll go first.
We can't
anyway.
necessarily say what caused it though.